I walked into dinner and found the table buried under real estate papers. Mom smiled like a victor, while Dad nodded as if approving a merger. Then my sister slapped her realtor card down next to a contract featuring my address on line 1. The part that froze my blood was not their audacity to sell my house. It was the dark secret the title search would expose later. My name is Tessa Carver, and if there is one thing 32 years of life has taught me, it is that an ambush never looks like an ambush until the trap has already snapped shut. I drove through the humidity of a Raleigh evening, the air thick enough to wear, heading toward what I believed was a celebration. My mother had called me 2 days ago, her voice pitching up an octave in that way that usually signaled performative affection, insisting that we needed to have a family dinner to toast my promotion to senior risk analyst. I should have known better. In the Carver family, accomplishments were not celebrated. They were assessed for extractable value. I pulled my car into the driveway of the house I grew up in, a 2-story colonial that looked picture-perfect from the street, but had a foundation that was slowly settling into the North Carolina clay, much like the moral compass of the people living inside it. I took a deep breath, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. The promotion had come with a significant raise, yes, but also with 60-hour work weeks that left me running on caffeine and sheer willpower. All I wanted was a glass of wine, a decent steak, and perhaps an hour where my father did not ask me why I was still single. I walked to the front door, key in hand, but the door swung open before I could slide the metal into the lock. There she is, the woman of the hour. My mother, Linda, stood there, arms wide. She was wearing her good pearls and a smile that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror. "Come in, Tessa. Come in. Everyone is waiting in the dining room." The hallway smelled of lemon polish and roasted chicken, a sensory memory that usually brought comfort. Tonight, it made the hair on the back of my arms stand up. The air conditioning was set too low, a frigid blast that hit me the moment I stepped across the threshold. I followed my mother into the formal dining room, expecting to see plates, silverware, perhaps a bottle of champagne chilling in a bucket. Instead, I saw paper. The mahogany dining table, usually treated with a reverence bordering on religious, was completely buried. Stacks of documents were arranged in neat, terrifying piles. There were glossy brochures, legal-sized contracts with yellow sticky notes flagging signature lines, and floor plans printed on high-quality cardstock. And sitting at the head of the table, looking like a judge presiding over a sentencing hearing, was my father, Mark. To his right sat my older sister, Brooke. Brooke was dressed in a blazer that cost more than my first car, her blonde hair sprayed into a helmet of professional competence. She had a pen in her hand, hovering over a document, and when she saw me, she capped it with a sharp, decisive click. "Surprise," Brooke said. I stopped at the edge of the rug. My stomach dropped, not with hunger, but with the sinking realization that I had walked into a room full of wolves. "What is this?" I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline dumping into my system. "I thought we were having dinner." "We are," my father said, gesturing to the only empty chair, which had been cleared of paperwork. "But first, we need to handle some family business. Sit down. Tessa." I did not sit. I walked closer to the table. My eyes scanning the documents, I saw the logo of Brooks Real Estate Brokerage, Prestige Realty Group, stamped in gold foil on a folder. I saw a comparative market analysis with a graph trending upward in bright green ink. And then I saw the cover sheet of the contract closest to me. Listing agreement. Property address, 4208 Cedarwood Lane, Raleigh, NC. My address. The room went silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the pounding of my own heart in my ears. I looked up at them. My mother had taken her seat next to my father, her hands clasped on the table as if in prayer. "You're selling my house?" I asked. The question felt absurd coming out of my mouth, like asking if the sky was green. "We are listing the house," Brooke corrected me, her tone breezy and condescending, the voice she used for first-time buyers who didn't understand escrow. The market in Raleigh is peaking right now. Tessa, inventory is low. I ran the comps this morning. If we list by Monday, we could be looking at multiple offers over asking price by Friday. I already have a pocket listing prepared. I actually have a couple from California flying in tomorrow who are looking for exactly your square footage. My square footage, I repeated. Brooke, I live there. That is my house. It's too big for you, my mother interjected, her voice soft, reasonable, the tone one uses with a toddler refusing to put on shoes. 3 bedrooms? 2.5 baths? For one person? It's wasteful. Honey, we were talking, and we realized you are just drowning in maintenance there. You're working so hard now with this new job. You don't need the stress of a yard. I love my yard, I said, my grip on my purse tightening until my knuckles turned white. And I am not selling. My father cleared his throat. It was a sound that used to make me freeze as a child, a precursor to a lecture or a punishment. Tessa, be realistic. This isn't just about what you want. This is a family asset. We have to think about the family portfolio. Family asset? I laughed, a short, sharp sound that held no humor. I bought that house 6 years ago. My name is on the deed. My name is on the mortgage. I pay the insurance. I pay the taxes. In what universe is this a family asset? We helped you, Mark said, his face reddening slightly. When you bought that place, who gave you the money for the down payment? We did. We made that house possible. We have an equity stake in your success. Tessa, and right now, the smart financial move, for the family, is to liquidate that equity while the market is hot. I remembered the help. I remembered it vividly. I was 26, scraping together every dollar I had. They had transferred $20,000 to my account to help with the closing costs. At the time, I had cried with gratitude. But 6 months later, my father had presented me with a repayment schedule. It wasn't a gift. It was a loan I had paid back, with interest. Over the course of 3 years, I had the bank transfers to prove it. I paid you back, I said, my voice dropping lower. Every cent, 3 years ago. You have no stake in my house, Dad. Oh, stop being so transactional, Linda snapped, her mask of sweetness slipping for a fraction of a second. Families help each other. We help you. You help us. Your sister has had a rough quarter. The market is shifting. She needs a solid listing to hit her numbers and secure her status as a top producer. You can just buy something smaller, a condo, something easier to manage. Brooke will waive her commission on the buy side for you. She's waiving nothing because I'm not selling, I said, taking a step back. Brooke stood up then, smoothing her skirt. She picked up a thick document bound with a binder clip. Tessa, stop being dramatic. It's already done. I have the photographer coming tomorrow at 8 in the morning. I have the videographer booked for 10, and the open house is scheduled for Sunday. I've already blasted the coming soon email to my database. We can't pull it back now. It would look unprofessional. You did what? The rage was starting to boil over, hot and suffocating. You advertised my home without my permission? Doing you a favor, Brooke insisted, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. Do you know how much work it is to prep a listing? I did it all for you. All you have to do is sign the ratification. I am not signing anything. My mother sighed, a long, heavy exhalation of disappointment. She reached across the table and slid a single sheet of paper toward me. It glided over the polished wood and stopped right at the edge, inches from my hip. Just sign it, Tessa, Linda said, her voice hard. Don't make this difficult. Don't be the daughter who turns her back on her family when we need to make a move. We're all in this together. Look, we even handled the preliminary paperwork to save you time. I looked down at the paper. It was an exclusive right-to-sell listing agreement. My eyes scanned the boilerplate text, jumping over the commission split. 6%, of course, and landed at the bottom of the page. There were 2 lines for signatures. On the line for listing agent, Brooke's signature was a flamboyant, confident loop. On the line for seller, there was already ink. I stared at it. It was my name, Tessa Carver. It was written in blue ink. It had the loop on the T that I used. It had the sharp slant to the right that I had developed in college. To a stranger, to a clerk at the county office, even to a bank teller who didn't look too closely, it would look like my signature. But I knew the pressure points of my own hand. I knew where my pen lifted and where it dragged. I looked at the C in Carver. It was too round, too hesitant. It lacked the sharp hook I always finished with. It was a forgery, a good one, practiced, perhaps traced, but a forgery nonetheless. My blood ran cold. The heat of the anger evaporated, replaced by a chilling clarity. They hadn't just planned to pressure me. They had prepared to bypass me entirely if I didn't comply. They had practiced being me. I looked up. My father was watching me, his jaw set. My mother was picking at a loose thread on the tablecloth, refusing to meet my eyes. Brooke was smiling, holding out a pen, as if the ink already on the page was just a placeholder, or perhaps hoping I wouldn't notice it in the flurry of other papers. "Who signed this?" I asked. My voice was barely a whisper, but in the silence of the dining room, it sounded like a gunshot. "It's just a draft," Brooke said quickly, too quickly. "Just to show you how it looks, to visualize the deal." "That is my signature," I said, "or someone trying to be me." "It's for the file. Tessa!" Mark slammed his hand on the table. "Stop obsessing over details. We are trying to help you maximize your assets. Why do you always have to be so difficult? Why can't you just say thank you and do what is best for the family?" I looked at the three of them, the people who were supposed to be my safe harbor. I saw the greed in Brooke's eyes. I saw the entitlement in my father's posture. I saw the manipulation in my mother's pout. If I screamed now, if I flipped this table and tore the papers to shreds, they would win. They would paint me as the hysterical daughter, the ungrateful child having a tantrum. They would gaslight me until I questioned my own sanity. They would say I was overworked, stressed, not thinking clearly. They would use my anger as proof that I was incompetent to manage my own affairs. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be the risk analyst they claimed to be so proud of. I took a slow breath, filling my lungs with the chilled, lemon-scented air. I memorized the layout of the table. I memorized the specific document that lay closest to me, the one with the fake signature. I started, then paused. I let my shoulders slump, feigning defeat. I saw the tension leave my mother's shoulders. She thought she had won. "I can't think right now. It's too much. The promotion, the work, this." "Of course, honey," Linda said, soothingly. "It's a big change, but good change." "I need to sleep on it," I said. "I can't sign anything tonight. My head is pounding." "The photographer is coming at 8, Brooke pressed. "I hear you," I said. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just stepped back, away from the table, away from the pen she was still holding out. "Give me one night to process everything, to look at the numbers." "Fine," Mark said, leaning back. "But don't drag your feet. Tessa, opportunity doesn't wait." "No," I said, turning toward the door. "It certainly doesn't." I walked out of the dining room, back down the hallway that smelled of lies and lemon polish. I didn't slam the front door. I closed it gently, with a soft click that sounded final. As I walked to my car, the humidity hit me again, but this time, it felt like armor. I didn't go home to cry. I didn't call a friend to vent. I got into my car, locked the doors, and sat in the dark driveway for a full minute, staring at the lit windows of my parents' house. They thought they had cornered a daughter. They had no idea they had just declared war on a stranger. I put the car in reverse and backed out, my mind already 3 moves ahead. The drive from my parents' house to my own took exactly 18 minutes if I hit all the green lights. But tonight, the distance felt like spanning 2 different dimensions. I gripped the steering wheel until my fingers ached, the leather warm against my skin, while the silence of the car offered a stark contrast to the cacophony of entitlement I had just left behind. As the streetlights of Raleigh flickered past, casting rhythmic shadows across the dashboard, my mind began to dissect the evening not as a daughter, but as what I actually was, a risk assessment specialist. My family suffered from a profound and willful blindness regarding my life. To Mark and Linda Carver, and certainly to my sister Brooke, I was simply Tessa the spinster, the one who stayed home, the one who worked on a computer doing something with numbers, that they assumed was akin to data entry or perhaps freelance bookkeeping. They viewed my working from home as a sign of leisure, a prolonged adolescence that I had somehow gotten away with. They saw my pajamas at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday and assumed laziness, never realizing that I had been up since 3 o'clock trading with the London markets. They had no idea that the home office they rolled their eyes at was the registered headquarters of Cedar Ridge Advisory. They did not know that I wasn't just a freelancer. I was the founder and principal consultant of a firm that managed risk strategies for mid-sized tech companies and supply chain logistics firms. I didn't just do numbers. I protected millions of dollars of other people's assets from exactly the kind of volatility and stupidity my family was currently displaying. I kept my business quiet because I valued my privacy, and frankly, because I knew that in my family, perceived wealth was like blood in the water for sharks. I turned onto my street, the tires crunching softly on the asphalt. My house, a 4-bedroom craftsman that sat back from the road behind a screen of mature oaks, was dark. Brooke's voice echoed in my head, shrill and confident. "This house is too big for you. Sell it and get a condo." It was the classic weaponization of my marital status, in their eyes, because I did not have a husband or children. My need for space was invalid. They saw my guest rooms not as offices or libraries, but as wasted square footage that could be monetized for their benefit. They saw my equity as a communal piggy bank that they could smash open whenever Brooke missed her sales quota or Dad made a bad bet on a penny stock. I pulled into my garage and killed the engine, but I didn't get out immediately. I sat there in the dark, letting the anger crystallize into a cold, hard strategy. My father's words bothered me the most. "You embarrassed the family. It's time to pay." The rewriting of history was breathtaking. I closed my eyes and summoned the mental image of my financial records. I had a mind like a steel trap for ledgers. It was why I was good at my job. 6 years ago, when I bought this place, I had been 26 and short on the 20% down payment required to avoid mortgage insurance. My parents had offered $25,000. I had hesitated, knowing strings were always attached, but they had insisted it was a leg up. However, 3 months after closing, Dad had presented me with a promissory note. He had claimed it was for tax purposes, but the interest rate listed was 4%, higher than the bank was offering at the time. I hadn't argued. I had simply set up an automated draft. I paid them back $520 a month for 4 years. I paid it off early with a lump sum transfer 2 years ago when I landed the contract with a logistics firm in Charlotte. I had the wire confirmation number memorized. I had the email from my father acknowledging receipt with a simple thumbs-up emoji. I did not owe them a single cent. In fact, adjusted for the emotional labor of being their daughter, they probably owed me. I finally stepped out of the car and entered my house. The security system beeped a greeting, and I punched in the code, the familiar sound grounding me. This was my fortress. My name was on the deed. My social security number was on the mortgage. I went straight to my home office, bypassing the kitchen. I didn't need wine anymore. I needed evidence. I unlocked my fireproof filing cabinet and pulled out the thick file labeled Property, 4208 Cedarwood. I flipped through the pages until I found the original promissory note and the paid-in-full letter I had forced my father to sign, mostly as a joke at the time, but now it felt like divine intervention. Then my mind drifted back to the document Brooke had tried to make me sign, the listing agreement, the signature that looked like mine but wasn't. Why was Brooke so confident? She was aggressive, yes, and ethically flexible, but she wasn't stupid. Real estate fraud was a felony. You lose your license for that. You go to jail for that. For her to present a contract with a forged signature at a family dinner meant she felt protected. It meant she believed that even if I saw it, I would be too cowed by family pressure to call it what it was. Or, more terrifyingly, She believed that the signature was already valid in some system somewhere. If she had a listing agreement ready, what else did she have? A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning ran down my spine. The timeline didn't make sense. She had a photographer coming at 8 in the morning. She had an open house scheduled. You don't book vendors and blast emails unless you are 100% certain the property is yours to sell. Brooke was acting like the owner. I picked up my phone. It was 9:15 at night. Late, but not too late for the kind of person I needed. I scrolled to Evan Holt Legal and hit call. Evan was not just a lawyer. He was a shark in a three-piece suit who specialized in property law and estate disputes. We had met 3 years ago when a former client tried to sue my firm over a bad quarter, and Evan had dismantled their case with the precision of a surgeon. Since then, I kept him on a retainer that cost me $3,000 a year, a line item my father would have called wasteful. He answered on the second ring. Tessa. His voice was gravelly, backed by the faint sound of jazz. You know I bill in 6-minute increments, and it is past 9, unless you're being arrested. This is going to cost you premium rates. I have a situation, I said, skipping the pleasantries. I need you to run a full title search on my house, immediately, tonight if you have access. First thing in the morning if you don't. The jazz music in the background stopped, likely paused by a remote. Evan's tone shifted instantly from banter to business. What happened? My family just tried to ambush me with a listing agreement, I said, pacing the length of my office. My sister, the realtor, claims she has rights to sell my property. My parents claim they have equity, but that's not the worst part. I saw a contract on the table with my signature on it, a signature I did not write. Forgery, Evan said flatly. It looked like a trace, I explained. It was close, but the pressure points were wrong. But Evan, she has photographers coming tomorrow. She's acting like the listing is already live. I need to know if she has filed anything with the county. I need to know if there are any liens, any quitclaims, anything that clouds my title. If she filed a forged deed, we are talking about a serious crime. Tessa, not just a family spat. I know, I said. That is why I'm calling you. I need to know if I still own my house, fully and completely, on paper. Okay. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. I can pull the digital registry records now, but the courthouse is closed for the physical filings until tomorrow morning. Sometimes there is a lag, but if she recorded something electronically in the last 48 hours, it might show pending. Check everything, I said. Check for powers of attorney, too. Is it possible they forged a power of attorney to sign on my behalf? It is possible, Evan admitted. If they found a crooked notary, does your sister know any notaries? She is a real estate agent, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. She knows dozens. She probably has them on speed dial. Right. Okay. Look, here's the advice for tonight. Do not engage. Do not text them. Do not email them. If they show up at your door, do not let them in. If they have a key, change the locks. Tonight. I have a keypad, I said. I can change the code from my phone. Do it now, Evan commanded. And Tessa? If they have forged a signature on a listing agreement, that is bad. But if they have touched the deed, if they have tried to transfer ownership or put themselves on the title, that is nuclear. Are you prepared to prosecute your sister? The question hung in the air. Was I? I thought about the smirk on Brooke's face. I thought about the way my mother slid that paper toward me, treating me like a child who needed to be managed. I thought about the absolute lack of respect for my autonomy, my hard work, and my sanctuary. I am not starting a war. Evan, I said, my voice dropping to a register that was calm, cold, and dangerous. They started it. I am just going to finish it. I want to win with paper. I want the kind of evidence that shuts them up forever. I don't want to scream at them. I want to bury them in statutes. That is my girl, Evan said. I will run the search. I will call you by 7 in the morning with what I find. Get some sleep. You are going to need it. I hung up and immediately opened the app for my smart locks. With a few taps, I deleted the user code labeled Mom and Dad and the one labeled Brook Emergency. I watched the little circle spin as the system updated. Access revoked. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. I walked to the window of my office and looked out at the street. It was quiet. The world looked normal. But inside the county clerk's database, there might be a digital bomb waiting to go off. I wasn't the unmarried daughter anymore. I wasn't the girl who needed help. I was the client. And tomorrow, my family was going to learn the difference between a doormat and a trapdoor. I turned off the light, leaving the house in darkness, waiting for the sun to rise on what I knew would be the longest Saturday of my life. Saturday morning arrived with a silence that felt heavy, like the drop in air pressure before a tornado touches down. I had been awake since 5 a.m, fueled by 2 cups of black coffee and a cold, focused rage. I was not wearing pajamas. I was dressed in a tailored navy blazer, dark jeans, and heels. The same armor I wore when I had to deliver bad news to a CEO about his supply chain vulnerabilities. I stood by the front window, obscured by the sheer curtains, watching the street. My phone on the kitchen counter had been silent. Evan had promised to call by 7, but it was now 7:45, and I had heard nothing. That silence was nerve-wracking, but I pushed it aside. Right now, I had a physical perimeter to defend. At exactly 7:58, the invasion began. It wasn't just Brooke's silver Mercedes, it was a caravan. A white van with Triangle Real Estate Media stenciled on the side pulled up behind her. Then came a sleek black SUV, the kind that screamed old money or new tech wealth. Doors opened, and the circus spilled out onto my driveway. I watched as my sister emerged, looking like she was stepping out of a lifestyle magazine. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit and held a clipboard, projecting an air of absolute authority. She waved at the guy getting out of the white van, the photographer, presumably, and then turned her high-wattage smile toward the couple exiting the black SUV. The couple looked to be in their 50s. The man was wearing a polo shirt tucked into khaki shorts, and the woman had a silk scarf tied around her neck. They had the eager, predatory look of cash buyers in a hot market. Brooke was doing this. She was actually doing this. She was bringing strangers to my home as if the conversation last night had never happened, or as if my refusal was simply a minor obstacle she could bulldoze over with enough momentum. I waited. I let them walk up the driveway. I let them admire the landscaping I had paid for last spring. I let them reach the front porch. I heard the beep, beep, beep of the keypad lock. Then a pause. Then the beep, beep, beep again. Faster this time. Brooke was trying the old code. "That is strange," I heard her say through the door. Her voice was muffled but audible. "The batteries must be low, or the system is glitching. Just a moment." She knocked. It was a cheerful, rhythmic rap. Shave and a haircut. I unlocked the deadbolt and swung the door open. Brooke's face lit up with relief, but it faltered when she saw me. I did not step back to let them in. I stood squarely in the center of the doorway, one hand on the frame, blocking the entrance completely. "Tessa, good morning," Brooke chirped. Her voice pitched high for the audience behind her. She tried to step forward, expecting me to move. I did not budge an inch. She almost bumped into me. "Oh, sorry. Great. You are up? This is Tyler, our photographer, and this is Dave, the videographer. And these lovely folks are Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. They are in town for the weekend and are very interested in a cash offer. So I squeezed them in before the open house." She said it all in a rush, a verbal steamroller designed to flatten me into compliance. If I argued, I would be the rude one. I would be the one making a scene in front of guests. It was a classic social manipulation tactic. I looked at Tyler, who was holding a tripod. I looked at the Sterlings, who were smiling politely. Then I looked at Brooke. "No," I said. The smile on Brooke's face froze. "Excuse me?" "No," I repeated, my voice calm, projecting clearly enough for everyone on the porch to hear. "No photographers, no video, and certainly no showings. You need to leave." The silence that followed was excruciating. A bird chirped cheerfully from the oak tree. oblivious to the human train wreck unfolding below. "Tessa, stop joking," Brooke hissed through her teeth, her smile now looking more like a rictus of panic. She leaned in closer, dropping her voice. "Do not embarrass me. These people have a checkbook ready. Just let us in. We will be done in 20 minutes. Go get a coffee or something." I looked past her to the Sterlings. The man had stopped smiling. The woman was clutching her purse tighter. "I am not joking," I said to Brooke. Then I shifted my gaze to the couple. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, I apologize for the inconvenience, but you have been misled. This home is not for sale. It has never been for sale. My sister here is trespassing." "Trespassing?" Mr. Sterling repeated. The word hung in the air like a lead weight. He looked at Brooke. "You told us the owner was motivated. You said the paperwork was signed last night." "It is," Brooke insisted, turning to them, her hands fluttering. "It is signed. This is just... My sister is having cold feet. It is emotional. Seller's remorse. It happens all the time. But the contract is valid. She is just being difficult." "I am not having cold feet," I said, my voice cutting through her babble like a knife. "I am the sole owner of this property. I have not signed a listing agreement. Any signature my sister claims to have is a forgery. If you step foot inside this house, I will call the police and report a home invasion." The photographer, Tyler, took 2 large steps back. He lowered his tripod. "Whoa. Okay, I am out. I don't do domestic disputes. Brooke, call me when you have a clean title." "Tyler, wait!" Brooke cried out, but he was already walking back to his van, shaking his head. "Brooke," Mrs. Sterling said, her voice icy, "you showed us a listing sheet. You said this was a pocket listing exclusive to your agency. Is this woman the owner?" "She is the owner on paper, yes," Brooke stammered, her face flushing a deep, blotchy red. "But it is a family asset. My parents put up the capital. We make the decisions as a unit. It is a shared property situation. Tessa just does not understand the structure." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was a cold, dry sound. A shared property situation? Really? "Brooke, look at me." She refused to make eye contact, staring instead at my shoulder. "Look at me," I commanded. She finally flicked her eyes to mine. "Have you pulled the deed? Have you actually gone to the county registrar and pulled the deed for this address?" "Mom and Dad said..." "I don't care what Mom and Dad said," I snapped. "You are a licensed real estate agent. You know the law. Did you verify the title before you brought strangers to my doorstep? Did you check the chain of ownership?" Brooke opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked like a fish gasping for air. The answer was written all over her face. She hadn't checked. She had taken our parents' word for it because it was what she wanted to believe, and because she was lazy. "You didn't," I said, letting the judgment drip from every syllable. "You tried to list a house based on hearsay and a forged signature. That is negligence. Brooke, gross negligence." Mr. Sterling turned to his wife. "Let's go. Martha, this is a mess." "Wait, please." Brooke grabbed Mr. Sterling's arm, an act of desperation that made him recoil. "We can work this out. We can go to my office. My father can explain the equity split. The price is right. You won't find another lot like this in Raleigh for under $1.2 million. I wouldn't buy this house for $10 if it comes with a legal battle," Mr. Sterling said, brushing her hand off. He looked at me, gave a curt nod of respect. "Ma'am, sorry for disturbing your morning." "Not your fault," I said. "You were lied to." The Sterlings turned and marched back to their SUV. The car doors slammed shut with the finality of a judge's gavel. The engine roared to life, and they backed out of the driveway, followed closely by the photographer's van. In less than 2 minutes, Brooke's big deal had evaporated. She stood alone on my porch, holding her clipboard. The silence returned, but now it was filled with the sound of her heavy breathing. She looked at the empty driveway, then turned back to me, her face contorted, shifting from shock to a petulant, childish anger. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" she shrieked. "That was a cash offer. They were ready to wire the money on Monday. You just cost the family hundreds of thousands of dollars." "I cost the family nothing," I said calmly, "because the family owns nothing here. Get off my porch. Brooke." "Mom is going to kill you," she spat. "Dad is going to come over here and drag you out of this house. You think you are so smart with your little blazer and your lock codes? You are nothing without us. We built you." "You didn't build me," I said. "You just borrowed money from my future self and made me pay it back with interest. And now? Now you are trembling because you know you just committed a crime in front of witnesses." "I did not commit a crime." "You presented a property for sale that you do not have the rights to," I said. "And you showed a contract with a fake signature. What do you think the Real Estate Commission would do if I sent them a recording of this encounter?" I pointed to the upper corner of the door frame. Brooke looked up and saw the small, blinking blue light of the doorbell camera. Her face went pale. All the blood drained out of her cheeks, leaving her looking waxen and old. "You recorded this?" she whispered. "Video and audio." I lied. Well, partially. It recorded, but I hadn't sent it anywhere yet. "Cloud storage, instant backup." Brooke took a step back. The confidence that had carried her up the walkway was gone, replaced by the shaky, hollow look of someone realizing the ground under their feet was actually a trapdoor. "Tessa, please," she said, her voice wobbling. "Delete it. Seriously. If that gets out, I could get flagged. My broker will suspend me." "Then you should have thought about that before you printed my address on a listing agreement," I said. "Go home, Brooke. Tell Mom and Dad the open house is canceled. Permanently." "This isn't over," she said, but it lacked conviction. It sounded like a line from a bad movie that she felt obligated to say. "For you, it might be," I replied. I stepped back and closed the door. I threw the deadbolt. Click. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, listening. I heard her footsteps retreating down the walk, slow and uneven. I heard her car door open and close. I heard the engine start. My heart was pounding in my chest, a frantic rhythm that belied my calm exterior. My hands were shaking. I had done it. I had stood my ground. But as the adrenaline began to fade, a new realization settled in. Brooke had been terrified when I mentioned the deed. She had been genuinely shocked when I asked if she had checked the records. That meant she truly believed she had the right to sell. She believed the lie our parents had told her. But why were Mom and Dad so confident? Why send her into the firing line if they knew the title was clean in my name? Unless... My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Evan. I pulled it out and answered. "Did you see the show? I just cleared the driveway." "Tessa, listen to me." Evan's voice was not congratulatory. It was tight, urgent. "I just got into the county's pending file queue. The physical records haven't updated yet, but there is a digital scan of a document uploaded 48 hours ago. It is in the processing batch." "What is it?" I asked, my stomach dropping. "It is a quitclaim deed," Evan said. "It purports to transfer 50% of your interest in the property to Mark and Linda Carver. And Tessa, it has a notary stamp." "I never signed a quitclaim," I said, gripping the phone. "I know," Evan said. "But according to this piece of paper, you did. And here is the kicker. The notary who stamped it? It is a woman named Sarah Jenkins. I looked her up. She is listed as an administrative assistant at Prestige Realty Group, Brooke's agency." "They didn't just list the house," I whispered, looking at the door I had just locked. "They tried to steal half of it before the sale." "We have a major problem," Evan said, "but we also have a smoking gun. Do not let anyone in. I am drafting an emergency injunction right now." I hung up the phone. The victory on the porch suddenly felt very small. Brooke hadn't just been incompetent. She had been part of a conspiracy, wittingly or not. And my parents hadn't just been pushy. They had committed grand larceny on paper. The war hadn't ended on the porch. It had just moved to the courthouse. The silence that followed Brooke's departure did not last long. It was replaced almost immediately by a digital siege that was, in many ways, more exhausting than the physical confrontation on my front porch. My phone began to vibrate against the granite countertop where I had left it, a relentless buzzing that sounded like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. I did not pick it up. I simply watched the screen light up with names that used to bring me comfort, but now induced a spike of cortisol. Mom calling, Dad calling, Brooke calling, Mom calling. When they realized I was not going to answer, the strategy shifted. The red notification bubble on my voicemail app climbed from 1 to 5, then to 8, then came the text messages. I poured myself a third cup of coffee, my hands steady despite the chaos, and sat down at the kitchen island to catalog the assault. I treated it just like a data breach at work. I did not engage emotionally. I simply documented the intrusion. I played the first voicemail on speaker. Tessa, pick up the phone. My mother's voice filled the kitchen. It was trembling, not with sadness, but with a weaponized fragility. I cannot believe what you did to your sister this morning. Those people were guests. You humiliated Brooke in front of clients. You made her look incompetent. After all she has done to set this up for you, you are being incredibly selfish. Call me back immediately so we can fix this mess before Dad gets involved. Delete. No, wait. Save. I needed to save everything. I played the second one. Tessa, it is Mom again. I am sitting here crying. I don't understand where this hostility is coming from. We are a family. Families share. Why are you so greedy? That house is too much for you, and we need the liquidity. Why can't you just trust us? You are acting like a stranger. It is scaring me. Tessa, you sound unstable. There it was, the pivot. In less than an hour, the narrative had shifted from Tessa is being difficult to Tessa is unstable. It was a classic gaslighting tactic my mother had perfected over decades. If I disagreed with them, I was being irrational. If I set a boundary, I was being cruel. If I used logic, I was being cold. They were laying the groundwork to dismiss my legal rights by attacking my mental competence. I opened the text thread from my father. Mark Carver did not leave voicemails. He preferred short, brutal commands, usually typed with his index finger and riddled with typos. You need to stop this nonsense right now. Brooke is trying to help the family. If you don't sign the papers by noon, we are done. I mean it, Tessa. No more family dinners. No more Christmas. You will be on your own. Unbelievable ingratitude. You owe us everything. I stared at the words, you owe us everything. It was the mantra of my childhood. I owed them for food, for shelter, for college tuition, even though I worked 2 jobs to pay off my student loans, and apparently, for the privilege of existing. Then, an email notification chimed on my laptop. It was from Brooke. I expected an apology, or perhaps a rage-filled rant matching her exit from my driveway. Instead, the subject line read, Updated listing strategy and e-sign link, 4208 Cedarwood. I opened it, fascinated by the sheer audacity. The email was written in her professional font, with her headshot in the signature block. Hi, Tessa. I know emotions were running high this morning, so I wanted to circle back when things were calmer. I apologized to the Sterlings and told them you were just feeling overwhelmed by the speed of the market. Good news. I managed to keep them on the hook. They are willing to overlook the outburst if we get the ratified contract to them by 5 o'clock today. I have attached a DocuSign link to make it easier for you. You don't even have to leave the house. Just click, sign, and I will handle the rest. Let's get you that condo downtown. You are going to love the maintenance-free lifestyle. Love, Brooke. It was breathtaking. She was completely ignoring the fact that I had kicked her out. She was ignoring my explicit refusal. She was bypassing reality entirely and trying to railroad me through administrative momentum. She was banking on the idea that if she acted like the sale was happening, I would eventually just give up and go along with it to avoid conflict. This was the trap they had set for 32 years. They pushed and pushed until I snapped, and then they pointed at my reaction as proof that I was the problem. If I replied now with anger, if I screamed at them to stop, they would say, "See? She is hysterical. She doesn't know what she wants. We need to take over for her own good." I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool air of my own home, my home that they were trying to steal. I would not give them the reaction they wanted. I would give them silence. I took screenshots of every text. I downloaded the voicemails as audio files. I converted Brooke's email into a PDF. Then, I attached everything to a new email addressed to Evan Holt. Subject: harassment and continued unauthorized listing activity. Body: Evan. See attached. They are not stopping. Brooke is still soliciting buyers after being trespassed. My father is threatening to cut contact, which is fine, but he is also implying I owe them money I do not owe. Please add this to the file for the injunction. I hit send. Almost immediately, Evan replied. Received. Do not respond to them. Not a word. Anything you say can be twisted. If they show up, do not open the door. If they refuse to leave, call the police. We fight this with public records, not arguments. Public records. The phrase stuck in my mind. I needed to ground myself in the truth, because their version of reality was so pervasive it was starting to make the edges of my own memory blur. Had they really helped me more than I thought? Was I misremembering the loan terms? I stood up and walked to the master bedroom closet. Behind a row of winter coats, bolted to the floor, was my fireproof safe. I spun the dial, left, left, and heard the heavy tumblers click into place. The door swung open. Inside were the documents that defined my adult life, my birth certificate, my passport, the title to my car, and a thick manila envelope labeled House Purchase, 2018. I took the envelope to the bed and dumped the contents out. There it was, the promissory note, typed up by my father on his home computer 6 years ago. Borrower: Tessa Carver. Lender: Mark and Linda Carver. Amount: $25,000. Interest rate: 4% per annum. I ran my fingers over the paper. It was real. It wasn't a hallucination. I picked up the stack of bank statements I had stapled to the back. Every month, for 48 months, a transfer of $520 and change, highlighted in yellow. And the final document, a single sheet of paper I had insisted they sign when I made the last balloon payment. Receipt of payment in full. The undersigned acknowledged that the loan dated June 12, 2018, has been satisfied in its entirety. Signed, Mark Carver, Linda Carver, notarized, September 4, 2021. I stared at the notary stamp on this document. It was a legitimate stamp from a bank officer at Wells Fargo. I remembered the day. I had dragged them to the bank branch to sign it because I wanted it official. My father had grumbled the whole time, calling me paranoid and uptight. You don't trust your own parents? He had asked. I trust contracts, I had replied. Thank God for that paranoia. I took a photo of the payoff letter and the original note and uploaded them to the folder I shared with Evan. This was my shield. They could claim family equity all they wanted, but in the eyes of the law, a loan was a loan, and once paid, it granted no lingering rights. But as I sat there on my bed, surrounded by the paper trail of my independence, a cold knot formed in my stomach. Brooke was not stupid. She was manipulative, yes, but she knew how real estate worked. You cannot close a sale without a title search. You cannot get title insurance without a clear chain of ownership. If she was pushing this hard, scheduling photographers, accepting offers, sending DocuSign links, she had to believe the title would clear. Why? Evan's voice from our earlier call echoed in my head. There is a digital scan of a document uploaded 48 hours ago, a quitclaim deed. The quitclaim. If that document was recorded, it meant that according to the county, I had voluntarily given away half my house 2 days ago. It meant that right now, technically, Mark and Linda Carver were owners. That was why Brooke was so confident. She wasn't just bullying me. She was operating on information she thought was solid. She thought the deed was done. She thought I was the one in denial, fighting a reality they had already rewritten behind my back. I looked at the time. It was 1:30 in the afternoon. The county clerk's office was closed for the weekend. The physical recording wouldn't happen until Monday morning, But the electronic submission was already in the system, sitting in a queue, waiting to become permanent. Evan was drafting an injunction to stop it. He was trying to catch the bullet before it hit the bone. The waiting was agonizing. The house, usually my sanctuary, felt like a cage. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a footstep. I found myself checking the security cameras every 5 minutes, expecting to see my father's truck or Brooke's Mercedes barreling up the driveway. I decided to clean. It was a nervous habit. I scrubbed the countertops until they gleamed. I vacuumed the rugs. I organized the spice rack, anything to keep my hands moving, to keep from picking up the phone and screaming at my mother. At 3:15, a notification popped up on my phone. Not a text, an alert from my bank app. Credit inquiry detected. I froze. I opened the app. Hard inquiry. Prestige Financial Services. Date, today. Brooke's preferred mortgage lender. They were running my credit. Why would they run my credit? I wasn't buying anything. Unless... I realized with a jolt of horror that if my parents were co-owners via the fake quitclaim, and they wanted to buy another property, or perhaps refinance this one to pull out cash, they might be using my credit profile to bolster the application. Or worse, Brooke was trying to pre-qualify me for that condo she kept talking about, without my consent. Identity theft. It wasn't just property fraud anymore. They were actively impersonating me to financial institutions. I didn't call the family. I didn't send a text. I logged into the 3 major credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, and I hit the freeze button on all of them. Click, click, click. Your credit file is now frozen. No new creditors can access your report. It was a small, silent act of violence against their plan. Next time Brooke tried to run my numbers, she would hit a brick wall. I sat back at the kitchen table, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the floor. I felt a strange sense of detachment. The people doing this, the people forging deeds, faking signatures, running credit checks, they shared my DNA. We had spent Christmas together 6 months ago. We had exchanged gifts. How long had they been planning this? Had the Christmas gifts been an assessment of my solvency? Had the birthday calls been a way to check if I was still single, still vulnerable? I realized then that I wasn't just mourning the loss of my family's integrity. I was mourning the death of the illusion I had clung to, that despite their flaws, they loved me. They didn't love me. They loved what I could provide. I was livestock to them. And you don't ask the cow for permission before you sell the milk. My phone rang again. It wasn't a blocked number. It wasn't Mom or Dad. It was Evan Holt. I picked it up on the first ring. Tell me you found something. I found everything, Evan said, and his voice was no longer the smooth, confident baritone of a high-priced lawyer. It was the sharp, jagged tone of a man who had just looked into an abyss. Tessa, sit down. We are not waiting for Monday. I am calling a judge I know at home. We need an emergency order, and we need it tonight. What is it? I asked, my grip on the phone tightening until my knuckles turned white. Is it the quitclaim? It is the quitclaim, Evan said. But it is not just the signature that is fake. Tessa, I pulled the metadata from the electronic filing, the IP address used to upload the document to the county portal. It resolves to a residential address in Raleigh. I held my breath. It was uploaded from your parents' house, Evan said. But the user account that logged in? It belongs to Brooke, and the notary stamp... Tessa, the notary stamp on the deed is expired. It expired 3 years ago. They photoshopped an old stamp onto a new document. They photoshopped it? I repeated, my brain struggling to comprehend the stupidity of it. It is a bad forgery, Evan said. Sloppy, desperate, but here's the thing. If the clerk on Monday morning is tired, or busy, or just not paying attention, they might stamp it recorded anyway. And once it is recorded, it becomes the truth until a court says otherwise. We have to stop the clock. Do whatever you have to do, I said. I am going to file a lis pendens, Evan said. It is a legal notice that puts a cloud on the title. It basically warns the world that this property is the subject of a lawsuit. It freezes everything. No sales, no refinancing, nothing. But Tessa, once I file this, it is public record. Your family will know. The war goes hot the second I hit send. Hit send, I said. Burn it down. Okay, Evan said. I will call you when the judge signs off. Lock your doors. Tessa, tonight is going to be a long night. I hung up the phone. The sun had set, and the house was dark. I walked to the front door and checked the deadbolt. Then I walked to the back door and checked that one too. I was alone in my fortress. Outside, the wolves were circling, armed with Photoshop and entitlement. But inside, I had the truth. I had a frozen credit file, and I had a lawyer who was about to drop a nuclear bomb on their family business. I went to the kitchen and poured the rest of the coffee down the sink. I opened a bottle of wine. If I was going to be the villain in their story, I might as well enjoy the part. The email from Evan arrived with a grim subject line: Evidence Packet Final PDF. I sat at my desk, the glow of the monitor illuminating the dark room. Outside, the crickets were chirping, oblivious to the fact that my life was being dismantled one PDF page at a time. I clicked the file. It was heavy, taking a few seconds to load, the spinning wheel of my operating system mocking my anxiety. When it finally popped open, I wasn't looking at a messy scan or a blurry photo. I was looking at a high-resolution digital copy of a document that had been submitted to the Wake County Register of Deeds. I am on the line, Evan said through the speakerphone. Are you looking at page 1? I am looking at it, I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from someone else. It was a quitclaim deed. In bold, capitalized letters at the top, it declared that Tessa Carver, grantor, was conveying 50% interest in the property located at 4208 Cedarwood Lane to Mark and Linda Carver, grantees. The consideration listed for this transfer of hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity was $1 in love and affection. I felt a wave of nausea. Love and affection, I read aloud. That is rich. Look at the date. Tessa, Evan commanded. I scanned down the page. The date of execution was listed as June 14th. That was 2 weeks ago, I whispered. That was 2 weeks before the dinner, before the listing, before any of this. Exactly, Evan said, his voice razor sharp. The ambush at the dinner table wasn't an opening negotiation. It was theater. They had already filed this paperwork. They just wanted you to sign the listing agreement voluntarily so they wouldn't have to rely on this document if they didn't have to. This was their insurance policy. My eyes moved to the bottom of the page, to the signature line. There it was, Tessa Carver. It was written in blue ink, but now that I was looking at it in high definition, zoomed in at 200%, the flaws were obvious, the lines were shaky. There were microscopic hesitations in the loops of the S's, the kind that happen when a hand is moving slowly, tracing over a line rather than flowing naturally. It lacked the sharp, aggressive hook on the final R that I had developed during years of signing compliance audits. That is not my signature, I said, a cold certainty settling in my gut. It is a bad copy. It looks like the one on the listing agreement Brooke showed me, but worse. I know, Evan said. But to a clerk processing hundreds of these a day, it looks close enough. But keep scrolling. Go to page 3. I scrolled down, past the legal description of the lot, past the survey references. I landed on a document titled Authorization to Sell and Transact. I had never seen this form before. It wasn't a standard real estate form. It looked like something cobbled together from a template found online. It stated that I, Tessa Carver, authorized Brooke Carver, licensee, to act as my agent in all matters regarding the sale of the property, including the right to negotiate offers, schedule inspections, and most damning of all, accept funds on my behalf. She gave herself power of attorney, I said, my blood turning to ice. She didn't just want to sell the house, she wanted to control the money. If she has that document, Evan explained, she could have intercepted the wire transfer from the closing attorney. She could have directed the funds into a joint account, or into the parents' account. She was going to steal the proceeds, I realized. They weren't going to ask me for a share for retirement. They were going to take it all. This moves us out of civil court and into criminal territory, Evan said. Forging a deed is a felony. Filing a false instrument with a public office is a felony. But forging a transaction authorization to facilitate wire fraud? That is federal territory. Tessa, if we pursue this, your sister isn't just losing her license. She is looking at prison time. I stared at the screen. My sister, the girl I used to share a bunk bed with, the girl who taught me how to braid hair. She had sat at my dining room table, eaten my food, and smiled at me, all while knowing this document was sitting in a digital queue, waiting to strip me of everything I had built. Who notarized this? I asked. You said the stamp was expired, but who is the person? Who would risk their career for this? Look at the stamp, Evan said. I zoomed in on the bottom right corner of the authorization. The stamp was faint, the ink uneven, as if it had been applied with too little pressure or perhaps copied from another source. Sarah Jenkins, Notary Public, Wake County, North Carolina. Sarah Jenkins, I repeated. The name triggered a faint memory. A young girl, maybe 22, with bright pink fingernails, sitting at the front desk of Brooke's office when I had stopped by to drop off a birthday gift last year. She was the receptionist, the one who brought Brooke her latte, the one who looked at Brooke with total adoration. The name sound familiar? Evan asked. She is the admin at Prestige Realty, I said. Brooke's assistant? Correct, Evan said. I did a background check. Sarah Jenkins is 23 years old. She got her notary commission 6 months ago. But here's the strange detail. Tessa, the commission number on this stamp? It doesn't match Sarah Jenkins. What? The name is Sarah Jenkins, Evan said, his voice dropping lower. But the commission number listed below it belongs to a woman named Margaret Vane, who retired in 2019, and the expiration date on the stamp is 2021. My brain struggled to process the layers of deceit. So it is not just a forged signature, it is a forged stamp? It is a Franken document, Evan said. They took a name they knew, Sarah, and pasted it over an old stamp they probably found in an old file at the office. They were too lazy, or too stupid, to realize that notary stamps have unique identification numbers that can be cross-referenced. They didn't even ask the real Sarah Jenkins to stamp it. They just used her name to make it look internal. Brooke did this, I said. Mom and Dad don't know how to use Photoshop. Dad types with one finger. This has Brooke's fingerprints all over it. It appears so, Evan agreed. And that authorization document? That is the smoking gun. That is proof of intent to defraud. It shows premeditation. I leaned back in my chair, the light from the monitor stinging my eyes. The betrayal was so complete, so architectural in its design, that I couldn't even feel sad anymore. I just felt a cold, hard resolve. What do we do? I asked. First, Evan said, shifting into tactical mode, you need to freeze your credit. If they are forging powers of attorney, they might try to open lines of credit in your name to fund repairs or staging. Done, I said. I froze everything at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, locked down tight. Good, Evan said. Smart. Next step is the cease and desist. I have drafted a letter to your parents, to Brooke, and to the broker in charge at Prestige Realty. We are putting the broker on notice that his agent is operating with forged documents. That will shut down the listing faster than any court order. No broker wants to lose their firm over a rogue agent. Send it, I said. And finally, Evan paused. I need to know how far you want to go. I can file the police report for identity theft and forgery tonight. Once that bell is rung, you cannot unring it. The district attorney will pick it up. Your parents, your sister, they will be arrested. Tessa, or at the very least, brought in for questioning. I looked at the signature on the screen. Tessa Carver, the fake version of me, the compliant version, the version that existed only to serve them. They had tried to erase the real me. They had tried to replace me with this paper doll who signed away her assets for love and affection. They didn't give me a choice, I said. They declared war. I am just returning fire. Is that a yes? Evan asked. File the report, I said. But Evan, don't send the cease and desist to Brooke just yet. Why not? Because she has an open house scheduled for tomorrow, I said, a plan forming in the back of my mind. She thinks she won. She thinks the Sterlings were just a hiccup. She thinks this document makes her untouchable. And I want her to stand in that living room, I said. I want her to feel safe, and then I want the truth to walk through the front door. Tessa, Evan warned, do not do anything dangerous. It won't be dangerous, I said. It will be educational. Send the letter to the broker. Let him be the one to call her, but let her set up her little signs first. Let her put out the cookies. Let her think she got away with it. You are scary when you are calm, Evan noted. I am a risk analyst, I said. I don't get mad. I just calculate the exposure. All right, Evan sighed. I will file the police report in the morning. I will send the notice to the broker at 9 a.m. sharp. That gives you about 12 hours. 12 hours is all I need, I said. I hung up the phone. I looked at the forged deed one last time before closing the window. The face of the notary, the phantom Sarah Jenkins, floated in my mind. I picked up my phone and opened a search browser. I typed in Prestige Realty Raleigh staff. I found the team page. There was Brooke, smiling her shark smile. And there, at the bottom of the support staff list, was Sarah Jenkins. She looked young, innocent, the kind of girl who did what her boss told her because she needed the job. I wondered if she knew her name was being used to commit a felony. I found her work email listed on the site. I opened a new message. Subject: Urgent question regarding notary commission. I stared at the blinking cursor. No. Warning her would tip off Brooke. Sarah was a loose end, a witness, not a target. I needed to keep her in the dark until the trap snapped shut. I deleted the draft. I turned off the computer. The room plunged back into darkness. The strange detail Evan had found, the mismatched notary stamp, was the thread that would unravel the whole sweater. My family hadn't just been greedy. They had been lazy. They had been arrogant. They thought I was too stupid to check the details, too emotional to read the fine print. They were about to learn that the devil wasn't in the details. The devil was sitting in the dark, drinking cheap wine, waiting for the sun to rise. The sun rose on Sunday morning with a deceptive brightness, casting long, cheerful beams across the hardwood floors I was fighting to keep. I sat at my kitchen island, the cold remnants of toast untouched on a plate. My laptop was open, refreshing the county registry page every 5 minutes. Though I knew the physical office was closed, it was a habit now, a nervous tic born of the realization that my own name was no longer a guarantee of ownership. At 8:15, my phone rang. It was Evan. He did not say hello. Tessa, are you sitting down? I am, I said, instinctively gripping the edge of the granite counter. Did you file the police report? I have the paperwork drafted, Evan said, his voice vibrating with a kind of grim excitement I had never heard before. But before I hit send, I need to tell you what I found when I cross-referenced your sister's credentials. I couldn't sleep, so I ran a deep dive on Brooke's license history through the North Carolina Real Estate Commission database. I thought I was just looking for prior complaints. He paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make my heart rate spike. Brooke is not a real estate agent. Tessa. I frowned, confused. What do you mean? She has been an agent for 5 years. I have seen her signs. She has the Mercedes. She has the headshots. She was an agent, Evan corrected. As of February 1st of this year, Brooke Carver's license is listed as inactive, administrative suspension. She failed to complete her mandatory post-licensing education requirements, and more importantly, she is delinquent on her renewal fees. She is currently prohibited by state law from engaging in any brokerage activity. She cannot list. She cannot show. She certainly cannot negotiate a contract. I felt the air leave the room. She is unlicensed? She is a ghost, Evan said. Every time she handed out a business card in the last 4 months, she was breaking the law. Every open house she hosted was a violation. And this listing agreement she tried to force you to sign? If she had executed it, the contract would be voidable on its face because she lacks the legal capacity to collect a commission. I stood up, pacing the small length of the kitchen. So why is she doing this? If she can't collect a commission, why go through all this trouble? Why the forgery? Why the pressure? Because she is desperate, Evan said. I looked at the public court records for civil judgments. Tessa, your sister is being sued by a creditor for $15,000 in unpaid credit card debt. A judgment was entered against her in March. She needs cash. Fast. She probably figured she could push this sale through, take the commission, or steal the equity via that forged power of attorney, and pay off her debts and reinstate her license before the commission noticed she was active. She is drowning, I whispered. And she decided to use my house as a life raft. It gets worse, Evan continued, and I didn't think that was possible. Remember the notary stamp? The Franken stamp using Sarah Jenkins' name and Margaret Vane's number? Yes. I searched for other documents recorded in Wake County using that specific fake commission number. I found three other deeds recorded in the last 6 months. All of them were quitclaims involving elderly owners transferring property to LLCs. And guess who the agent of record was on the subsequent sales of those properties? I closed my eyes. Brooke, Evan confirmed. Tessa, this is not a one-time desperate act. Your sister is running a systematic fraud ring. She is targeting vulnerable properties, likely finding owners who are confused or pressured, forging quitclaims to transfer title, and then selling the assets, using a fake notary stamp to bypass the legal checks. If the district attorney sees this pattern, they won't just look at your house. They are going to open a RICO case. This is organized criminal activity. My knees finally gave out, and I sat back down on the stool. My family, my parents, were they victims too? Or were they part of the LLCs? Did you check the LLCs? I asked, my voice trembling. I did, Evan said gently. One of them lists Mark Carver as a managing member. My father? The silence on the line was deafening. It wasn't just Brooke. It was Dad. They were in it together. The family business wasn't real estate. It was theft, the dinner, the guilt trips about being ungrateful, the "we helped you" narrative. It was all just grooming. They had groomed me to be the next Mark. They are going to prison, I said. It wasn't a question. If we file this police report and hand this packet to the DA, yes, Evan said. There is no wiggling out of a pattern like this. Mandatory minimums for white-collar fraud of this scale are significant. I stared at the coffee maker. I hated them. I hated what they had done to me. I hated the disrespect. But the image of my father in an orange jumpsuit, or my sister being handcuffed in front of her neighbors, it made my stomach turn. I wasn't protecting them. I was protecting myself from the guilt that I knew, irrationally, would haunt me. I don't want to be the one who sends them to jail without looking them in the eye first, I said. I want to know why. I want to hear them say it. Tessa, Evan warned, this is dangerous ground. I am not going to the house, I said. I want them on neutral ground. I want them in a room where they can't gaslight me because the facts are sitting on the table. Evan sighed. My office, today, Sunday, I will come in. It is safer there. We have cameras. We have witnesses. Set it up, I said. Call them. Tell them. Tell them I am ready to sign. Tell them I want to do it properly, with legal representation, to ensure the family assets are protected. Play into their greed. They will come running. You want to bait them, Evan stated. I want to catch them, I corrected. I want them to walk into that room thinking they won, so I can see the look on their faces when they realize they have lost everything. Okay, Evan said. I will call Brooke. I will tell her I am your attorney and that you have agreed to transfer the title. But we need to execute the final quitclaim deed in person to satisfy the title insurance company. She will panic about the title insurance, since she knows the current deed is fake, but she will be too greedy to resist the chance to fix it. Do it, I said. Make the appointment for 1 o'clock. That gives me time to get dressed. 1 o'clock, Evan said. I will have the security guard in the lobby stand by. Tessa, promise me one thing. When you walk into that room, do not say a word until I tell you to. Let me lay out the evidence. If you start screaming, they will just clam up. I won't scream, I said. I am done screaming. We hung up. I walked to my bedroom and stood in front of the mirror. I looked pale. My eyes were rimmed with red. I splashed cold water on my face and applied makeup with the precision of a soldier applying camouflage. I chose a black dress, severe, professional, funeral attire. Because today, a family was dying. At 12:30, I drove to Evan's office in downtown Raleigh. The city was quiet, the Sunday streets empty. I parked in the garage and took the elevator up to the 12th floor. Evan met me at the glass doors. He looked different than he did on Zoom. Taller, he was wearing a casual blazer over a t-shirt, having come in on his day off. He led me to the conference room, the big one with the mahogany table that looked suspiciously like the dining table at my parents' house. Only this one was covered in real evidence, not fake contracts. They are on their way, Evan said, checking his watch. Brooke sounded relieved when I called. She said, "Thank God Tessa finally came to her senses. She is bringing Mom and Dad." "Of course she is," I said, taking a seat at the head of the table. "They need to witness the harvest." At 1:10, the elevator chimed. I heard their voices in the hallway. "I told you she would fold." Brooke's voice was loud, triumphant. "She just needed a little push. The open house pressure got to her." "We just have to be gentle with her," my mother said. "Don't gloat. Mark, just get the signature." "I just want this done," my father grunted. "I have a tea time at 3. The door swung open. They stopped. I sat at the far end of the long table, my hands folded on top of a thick red folder. Evan stood to my right, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. Brooke was the first to recover. She smiled, that plastic, realtor smile, though it faltered slightly when she saw Evan. "Tessa, I am so glad you called. And who is this?" "This is Evan Holt," I said, my voice steady. "My attorney." "Attorney?" Mark stepped forward, his face darkening. "We don't need lawyers. Tessa, this is a family matter. We agreed to handle this internally." "Actually," Evan spoke up, his voice smooth and dangerous, "we are here to handle it legally. Please, sit down." He gestured to the 3 empty chairs arranged like an interrogation lineup on the other side of the table. Brooke hesitated. She looked at the red folder under my hands. She looked at Evan's calm demeanor. Her survival instinct, honed by years of dodging consequences, was starting to ping. "We can just sign the papers here," Brooke said, pulling a document from her bag. "I brought a fresh copy of the deed. We can just—" "Sit down, Brooke," I said. It wasn't a request. It was an order. Slowly, they sat. Linda looked nervous, clutching her purse. Mark looked annoyed. Brooke looked alert, her eyes darting around the room. "We are here," Evan began, moving to the whiteboard behind me, "because there seems to be some confusion regarding the ownership of 4208 Cedarwood Lane, and frankly, regarding the definition of the word crime." "Excuse me?" Mark sputtered. "Now listen here." "No, you listen," Evan interrupted, dropping the polite facade. He slapped a piece of paper onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped in front of Brooke. It was the printout of her license status from the Real Estate Commission. Status, inactive, suspended. Brooke stared at it. Her face went gray. "You are practicing without a license, Ms. Carver," Evan said. "That is a Class 1 misdemeanor, but that is the least of your problems." He slid the next paper, the zoomed-in image of the fake notary stamp. "Sarah Jenkins," Evan read aloud. "A lovely girl. I wonder what she will say when the police ask her why her name is on a deed transfer for a property she has never visited. using a commission number that belongs to a retired woman named Margaret Vane. Brooke made a small, choking sound. Linda looked at Brooke. What is he talking about? You said the paperwork was standard. It is standard for her, Evan said, sliding the third document, the list of LLCs and the other 3 properties sold with the same fake stamp. It seems to be her standard operating procedure: fraud, forgery, elder abuse. Mark went still. He stared at the list of LLCs. He saw his own name. You put my name on these? Mark whispered, turning to Brooke. You said these were legitimate flip investments. You said you handled the titles. They were, Brooke cried, her voice cracking. I had to expedite things. The system is too slow. I was going to fix it later. You can't fix a felony retroactively, Brooke, I said. The room was silent. The air conditioning hummed, sounding like a distant siren. Here is the situation, Evan said, leaning over the table. I have a police report drafted. It charges Brooke Carver with 4 counts of forgery, 4 counts of uttering a forged instrument, and 1 count of identity theft. It charges Mark Carver as a co-conspirator in a fraudulent real estate scheme. Me? Mark stood up, his face purple. I didn't know. She told me it was legal. I just signed where she told me to sign. And you? I looked at my mother. You knew. You knew about the quitclaim. You tried to guilt me into accepting it. You played the emotional card while they played the legal one. Tessa, please. Linda began to cry. But it wasn't the manipulative crying of yesterday. This was fear. We are your family. You can't put your sister in jail. She made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting a birthday, I said. This is a conspiracy. Evan placed a final document on the table. It was a formal confession and a surrender of all claims. We have a choice to make today, Evan said. Option A, I call the detective who is expecting my call at 2 o'clock. Option B, you explain exactly why you did this, every detail, no lies, and then we discuss terms. Brooke was shaking. She looked at Dad, but he wouldn't look at her. He was too busy reading the LLC documents, realizing his retirement was tied to a criminal enterprise. Why? I asked, looking directly at Brooke. Just tell me why. Brooke looked up. Her eyes were wet, but there was no remorse in them, only anger. Because it is not fair, she shouted. You have that big house all to yourself. You have the perfect job. I am drowning, Tessa. I have debt collectors calling me every day. Mom and Dad are tapped out. We needed the money. And you? You are just sitting on it. You didn't earn it. You just got lucky. I worked, I said softly. While you were buying Mercedes you couldn't afford. It is family money, she screamed. It belongs to all of us. And there it is, Evan said quietly. The motive. I looked at them. My father, the failed investor, my mother, the enabler, my sister, the thief. I am not signing your deed, I said, and I am not selling my house, but you are going to sign something else. I nodded to Evan. What is this? Mark asked, looking at the document Evan placed before him. A full admission of guilt, Evan said, and a voluntary surrender of your real estate license for Brooke, and a repayment agreement for every cent of equity you stole from those other people. If you sign this, and if you pay it back, Tessa might not file the police report today, but the real estate commission? They are getting the file no matter what. Brooke put her head in her hands and sobbed. It was the sound of a world collapsing. I watched them. I felt no satisfaction. I felt no joy. I just felt clean. The fog of their gaslighting had finally lifted, and I could see them for exactly what they were. Small, scared people who thought they were entitled to my life. Start talking, I said. From the beginning, who had the idea to forge my signature first? My father slowly raised his hand, pointing a trembling finger at Brooke. It was her idea, he croaked. She said you would never know. And just like that, the family turned on itself. The air in the conference room was filtered and cool, maintained at a precise 68 degrees. But as the heavy oak door swung open, The temperature seemed to drop even further. I sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, my back to the window that overlooked the Raleigh skyline. To my right sat Evan, his posture relaxed but alert, a stack of files arranged with geometric precision in front of him. We had been waiting for 10 minutes. The delay was a power move. I knew. My father was never late unless he wanted to make a point. When they finally walked in, the dynamic was immediately apparent. Mark led the way, striding into the room with his chest puffed out, clutching a leather portfolio as if he were about to acquire a competitor. Linda followed, her face pinched into a mask of martyred patience, dabbing at her nose with a tissue. Trailing them was Brooke. She looked less like a shark today, and more like someone trying to hold a crumbling dam together with duct tape. She was wearing her closer suit, a bright red blazer, but her eyes were darting around the room, assessing the threats. They did not look like people walking into an ambush. They looked like people walking into a negotiation they expected to win. "About time," Mark grunted, pulling out a chair at the opposite end of the table without making eye contact with me. He sat down and slapped his portfolio onto the wood. "Let's make this quick. I have a tea time at 3, and this whole charade has already wasted enough of my weekend." Linda sat next to him, sighing loudly. She looked at me with eyes that were wet, but cold. "Tessa, really? A lawyer's office? You are being so dramatic. We could have settled this at the kitchen table if you weren't so intent on making a scene." "It is not a scene, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "It is a clarification." "Clarification," Mark scoffed. "Fine, here is the clarification. We are willing to be generous. Since you have lived in the house and paid the mortgage, we will agree to a 60-40 split. You keep 60% of the net proceeds. The family takes 40. That covers our initial investment plus the appreciation we are entitled to for helping you get started. Brooke takes her standard 6% commission, of course." Brooke nodded. Finding her voice, she pulled a pen from her purse, clicking it rhythmically. "It is a very fair offer. Tessa, the market is hot. Even with 40% going to Mom and Dad, you are walking away with a nice chunk of change for a down payment on a condo. I already have the papers drafted." I watched them. It was fascinating, in a morbid way. They had actually convinced themselves this was a business deal. They had erased the forgery, the lies, and the coercion from their minds, and replaced it with a narrative of fairness. I looked at Evan. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply reached out and placed his hand on the first file in his stack. "Mr. and Mrs. Carver," Evan began, his voice low and smooth, filling the room without effort. "I think there is a fundamental misunderstanding of why you are here today. You are not here to negotiate a split. You are here to understand why you do not own a single square inch of the property at 4208 Cedarwood Lane." Mark's face reddened instantly. "Excuse me? We put up the capital. We are equity partners." "Let's look at the record," Evan said. He flipped open the file and slid a document across the table. It spun perfectly, coming to rest right in front of Mark. It was the title search report. "This is the official chain of title from the Wake County Registry of Deeds," Evan explained. "It shows the history of the property for the last 10 years. As you can see, the current deed lists one owner, and one owner only, Tessa Carver." Mark barely glanced at it. "That is just paperwork. It doesn't reflect the verbal agreement. We gave her $25,000 for the down payment. That buys us a stake." "Ah, the money," Evan said. He reached for the second document. "You claim that money was an investment?" "Of course it was," Linda chimed in. "We helped her. That is what families do. We invest in each other." "Investments carry risk," Evan noted. "And investments typically imply a share of ownership. However, loans are different. Loans are a contract of debt, and once a debt is paid, the relationship ends." He slid the second paper across the table. It was the photocopy of the promissory note Mark had typed up himself 6 years ago. "This is your handwriting, is it not, Mr. Carver?" Evan asked. Mark stared at the paper. "So what? That just proves we gave her the money." "It proves you lent her the money, Evan corrected him, tapping the clause regarding the interest rate. 4% interest. You acted as a bank, and banks do not get to claim 40% of the profits when a house is sold just because they held the mortgage. They get their principal and their interest. That is all. Then Evan slid the third document, the paid-in-full receipt with the notarized signatures from the bank branch. Tessa paid you back, Evan said. Every penny, with interest, as of September 2021, her financial obligation to you ceased to exist. You have no lien. You have no equity. You have no claim. That is technical legal mumbo-jumbo. Mark slammed his hand on the table, rattling the water pitchers. We are her parents. We made that house possible. You can't just wave a piece of paper and erase moral obligation. But I can wave a piece of paper and enforce the law, Evan said coolly. And in the eyes of the law, moral obligation does not grant you the right to sell someone else's asset. You are twisting things, Linda said, her voice trembling with indignation. Tessa, stop this. Tell him to stop. We are family. Family doesn't sue family. Family shares. Family, Evan repeated the word, tasting it like spoiled milk. It is interesting you bring that up, Mrs. Carver, because in my experience, families who respect each other do not need to operate in the shadows. They do not need to bypass the owner. We didn't bypass anyone, Brooke interjected, her voice shrill. We were acting in her best interest. She was too busy to handle the listing, so we stepped in to help. Is that so? Evan turned his gaze to Brooke. The weight of his attention made her shrink back in her chair. You were just helping? So, the paperwork you prepared, that was just to be helpful? Yes, Brooke said, though her confidence was visibly cracking. Just standard listing docs. Standard, Evan mused. He reached for the thickest file on his desk, the red one. He opened it slowly. The sound of the paper turning was the only noise in the room. If it was all standard, and if you were just helping, Evan said, then can someone explain this? He didn't slide this document. He held it up, facing them. It was the quitclaim deed that had been uploaded to the county portal 48 hours ago, the one transferring 50% of my house to Mark and Linda. This document was submitted electronically on Friday afternoon, Evan said. It claims that Tessa voluntarily gave away half her home, but Tessa tells me she was not in a room with a notary on Friday. In fact, she was at work. The color drained from Brooke's face. It happened instantly, like a light switch being flipped off. She went from flushed defiance to a ghostly, sickly white. Mark squinted at the document. What is that? It is a forgery, Evan stated, dropping the paper onto the center of the table. A felony-grade forgery. It attempts to alter the deed of record. I didn't, Brooke stammered. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to put the pen down. And here is the most interesting part, Evan continued. Relentless. The notary stamp on this document? It belongs to a Sarah Jenkins, but the commission number belongs to a woman named Margaret Vane, who has been retired for years, and the signature of Tessa Carver? Well, let's just say a handwriting expert would have a field day with the hesitation marks. Linda looked at the document, then at Brooke. Brooke, you said Tessa signed the preliminary papers. You said you took care of it. She didn't sign anything, I said, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. You know I didn't sign it. Brooke, you traced it, or you copy-pasted it from an old birthday card. I don't know how you did it, but I know you did it. I was trying to secure the asset, Brooke blurted out, tears springing to her eyes. The market is moving so fast. If we didn't have the deed ready, the title company would delay closing. I was just fixing the timeline. You were fixing the timeline by committing fraud, Evan said. And not just simple fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, use of a counterfeit seal. Mark looked at Brooke, then at the document, then at me. The bluster was gone. The arrogance of the 60-40 split had evaporated. He looked suddenly old and very, very afraid. Is this Has this been recorded? Mark asked, his voice hoarse. It is in the pending queue, Evan said, which means the attempt has been made. The crime has been committed. The only question now is whether the police arrive at your house to execute a search warrant for your computers, or if we resolve this right here, right now. Police? Linda whispered, clutching her chest. Oh my God, Mark, do something. Me? Mark turned on her. This was her idea. He pointed a trembling finger at Brooke. She told me it was a loophole. She said it was a constructive trust transfer. I didn't know she was faking signatures. You signed the acceptance line, Brooke screamed, slamming her hands on the table. Don't you dare put this all on me. You wanted the money for your bad bets. You told me to get it done by any means necessary. I never said break the law, Mark shouted back. You said don't bother Tessa with the details, Brooke shrieked. I sat back in my chair, watching them tear each other apart. The family unit that preached unity and sharing was now a pit of vipers biting at each other's tails to survive. Evan watched them for a moment, letting the panic set in, letting the reality of their situation sink into their bones. Then he raised a hand. Stop, he commanded. They fell silent, panting, looking at him with the desperation of drowning people looking at a lifeboat. The police have not been called yet, Evan said. But that depends entirely on what happens in the next 5 minutes. He pulled a final thin stack of papers from his briefcase. Tessa is the owner, Evan said. That is not up for debate. There is no split. There is no negotiation. There is no commission. He pushed the papers toward them. This is a formal withdrawal of the fraudulent deed, Evan said. This is a confession of judgment admitting to the forgery, and this, he looked at Brooke, is a voluntary surrender of your real estate license to the North Carolina Commission. My license? Brooke gasped. But that is my career. Your career ended the moment you photoshopped that notary stamp, Evan said brutally. Now we are just discussing whether your future involves a new job or a prison cell. Sign the papers. Brooke, withdraw the listing, admit the fraud, or I pick up this phone and call the district attorney. Brooke looked at me. Tessa, please, don't let him do this. I'm your sister. I looked at her. I looked at the red blazer, the terrified eyes, the selfishness that still lingered even in her fear. If you were my sister, I said, you would have asked me. You wouldn't have stolen from me. I pointed to the papers. Sign them, before I change my mind. Brooke picked up the pen. Her hand shook violently as she lowered it to the paper. Mark slumped in his chair. Defeated, Linda wept into her hands. The play was over. The actors had forgotten their lines, and the only thing left on the stage was the truth. The ink on the confession papers was still wet, gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights of the conference room. Brooke sat slumped in her chair, the pen loosely held in her trembling fingers, looking less like a real estate mogul and more like a child who had been caught drawing on the walls. But the signing of the papers was merely the mechanical end to the fraud. It did not answer the question that had been gnawing at my gut since I saw the documents on my dining room table. Why? Why now? Why this urgency? And why? Specifically, did they feel so emboldened to bypass me entirely? Evan did not put his files away. He remained standing, his gaze fixed on my sister with the intensity of a laser. He picked up the signed surrender of her license and inspected it, ensuring every line was filled, before sliding it into his own briefcase. So, Evan said, his voice deceptively casual, now that we have established the what and the how, let us discuss the why, because, Brooke, there is something that does not add up for me. Brooke sniffed, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. I told you, we needed the money. I have debt. I know about your credit card debt, Evan said dismissively. $15,000 is a lot for a suspended agent, but it is not enough to risk a 10-year prison sentence for felony fraud, and it certainly isn't enough to drag your parents into a criminal conspiracy. You don't forge a deed for $15,000, you do it for survival. He walked around the table, stopping directly behind Brooke's chair. Did you verify the ownership before you brought the Sterlings to the house? Evan asked. Did you actually check the registry to see if the fake deed had cleared? Brooke flinched. I checked the portal. It said pending. I thought that was enough. You thought pending was enough to sell $1 million asset? Evan asked. Or did someone tell you it would be enough? Brooke went silent, her eyes darting toward our father. I turned my attention to my mother. Linda was staring at a spot on the mahogany table, her face pale, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. Mom, I said. She didn't look up. Mom, look at me. Slowly, reluctantly, she raised her eyes. Who told Brooke that my house was family property? I asked. Who planted that seed? Because Brooke is greedy, yes, but she is also lazy. She doesn't invent complex narratives about family equity on her own. That sounds like a lecture I've heard my whole life. It is family property, Linda whispered, her voice weak but stubborn. We are a unit. Tessa, what belongs to one belongs to all. That is how we raised you. That is how you raised me, I corrected. To share, to give, to sacrifice. But you raised Brooke to take, and you raised Dad to expect. We were just trying to help everyone, Linda insisted. You don't understand the pressure. What pressure? I snapped. I am the one working 60 hours a week. I am the one paying the mortgage. What pressure are you under, sitting in your paid-off house in the suburbs? Evan cleared his throat. He walked back to his side of the table and picked up a single, slender document that he had not yet revealed. It wasn't a deed. It wasn't a listing agreement. It was on plain legal paper, stamped with the seal of the Wake County Civil Superior Court. Actually, Tessa, Evan said, their house is not paid off. Not anymore. My father's head snapped up. For the first time, I saw true terror in his eyes. Not the annoyance of a man inconvenienced, but the primal fear of a man exposed. Don't, Mark said. It was a plea. Evan ignored him. He slid the document across the table. It stopped in front of me. I read the header. Judgment creditor. Apex Commercial Lending. Judgment debtor. Mark Carver. What is this? I asked, scanning the numbers. Your father, Evan explained, decided to play venture capitalist about 18 months ago. He co-signed a commercial business loan for a friend's startup, a restaurant venture, I believe. He put up his own home and his retirement accounts as collateral for the guarantee. I looked at the number at the bottom of the page. It was staggering. $240,000. The business failed 6 months ago. Evan continued. The friend declared bankruptcy. But your father? He is the guarantor. Apex Lending is coming for him. They have already secured a judgment. They are moving to foreclose on his house and garnish his accounts within 30 days unless he satisfies the debt. I looked at Mark, the man who had lectured me on fiscal responsibility my entire life, the man who had charged me interest on a down payment loan. He was broke. He was worse than broke. He was underwater. You are losing your house, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Mark didn't answer. He just stared at the table, his jaw working furiously. That is why, Evan said, connecting the dots for everyone. They didn't need your house for a retirement condo for you. Tessa, they needed your equity to pay off Mark's judgment. If they could sell your place for $1 million, take 40%, $400,000, they could pay off Apex, save their own home, and still have money left over to look like heroes. I looked at Linda. You knew? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. We didn't know what else to do. Tessa, he was going to lose everything. The house, the club membership, the reputation. We couldn't let people know. So you decided to steal from me instead, I said. You decided to liquidate my life to save his reputation. We were going to pay you back, Mark burst out, his voice cracking. Eventually, once I got back on my feet, we just needed a bridge loan, essentially. A bridge loan is something you ask for, I said coldly. This was a robbery. We couldn't ask you, Linda cried. We knew you would say no. You are so rigid about money. You would have asked to see the business plan. You would have lectured us. We couldn't handle the shame. Tessa. So we thought if we just did it, if we presented it as a done deal, you would be angry for a while, but you would accept it because you love us. I felt a chill run through my veins that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This was the core of it, the toxic, rotting core of my family dynamic. They viewed my boundaries not as rights, but as obstacles to be circumvented. They viewed my autonomy as a flaw. You chose the fait accompli strategy, I said. Create a disaster, and force the responsible daughter to clean it up. That is what this was. You forged the deed so that by the time I found out, the house would be sold, the money would be transferred, and I would be left with no choice but to forgive you or send you to jail. And you bet everything on the fact that I wouldn't send you to jail. We bet on your love, Linda said, as if that made it noble. You bet on my guilt, I corrected. There is a difference. I turned to Brooke. She was quiet now, watching the revelation of our father's failure with a look of dawning horror. She hadn't known the full extent either. I realized she knew they needed money, but she didn't know they were on the brink of foreclosure. And you, I said to her, you didn't do this just for Dad. You have your own judgment to pay, but that is small change. Why go this far? Brooke? Brooke looked down at her hands. I haven't closed a deal in 6 months, she whispered. Everyone in the office is talking. My broker was threatening to cut me loose even before the suspension. I needed a trophy listing. I needed everyone to see a $1 million sold sign with my name on it. I thought if I saved Dad and closed this deal, I would be the hero. I would be the golden child again. So you used me, I said. I was just raw material for your redemption arc. I am sorry, Brooke sobbed, her composure finally shattering completely. I am so sorry, Tessa. I was just so scared. Evan stepped forward, his voice hard. Fear is not a defense for fraud. Ms. Carver, let's be very clear about the exposure here. You forged a government document. You impersonated a notary. You engaged in a conspiracy to defraud a title company. And he pointed at Mark. You acted as the beneficiary of that fraud to evade a lawful creditor. That is bankruptcy fraud on top of everything else. The room fell silent. The weight of the crimes was heavy enough to crush the breath out of them. If this goes to the district attorney, Evan said, Mark, you lose your house anyway, and you go to prison. Linda, you are an accessory. And Brooke, you are looking at 5 to 10 years, mandatory. Brooke put her head on the table and wailed. It was a loud, ugly sound. Please, Tessa, please don't let him call the police. I will do anything. I will pay it back. I will work at McDonald's. Just don't let me go to jail. I watched her cry. I watched my father tremble. I watched my mother weep. For years, these tears would have broken me. I would have rushed to fix it. I would have written the check. I would have taken the burden onto my own shoulders because that was my role. I was the fixer. I was the safety net. But today, looking at the evidence of how little they respected me, I felt nothing. The cord had been cut. Brooke, I said, my voice cutting through her sobs. She looked up, her face a mess of mascara and snot, hope flickering in her eyes. Are you crying because you are sorry? I asked, leaning forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. Or are you crying because you almost got away with it, and now you have to face the consequences? She froze. She opened her mouth to speak, but the lie died in her throat. She looked away. That is what I thought, I said. I stood up. I picked up the red folder containing the title search and the forged deed. Evan, I said, file the injunction to correct the title. Ensure the registry knows the previous upload was fraudulent, but don't call the police yet. My father let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. Thank you, Tessa. Thank you. Don't thank me, I said, looking down at him with cold eyes. I am not doing it for you. I am doing it because I don't want the name Carver associated with a felon in the local news. It is bad for my business. I walked to the door, then stopped and turned back to them. But here is the new reality, I said. Mark, you are going to sell your house. You are going to pay your debt. You are not getting a dime from me. Brooke, you are going to find a new career, one that doesn't involve other people's money. And until every single lien is cleared, and every single dollar Brooke stole from those other elderly people is repaid, I do not have a family." "Tessa, you can't mean that," Linda pleaded. "I mean every word," I said. "You wanted the house so badly? Fine, you can keep the memory of it. But you lost the daughter who lived inside." I opened the door and walked out into the hallway, leaving them sitting in the wreckage of their own greed. Evan followed me, closing the door softly on their sobbing. "You handled that well," Evan said as we walked toward the elevator. "Did I?" I asked, feeling the adrenaline begin to crash. "You got the truth," Evan said, "and you kept your house." "I kept the house," I agreed, "but I think I just evicted my past." I pressed the down button. The elevator arrived with a cheerful ding. I stepped in, ready to descend back to the street level, back to the real world where deeds were signed with ink, not betrayal. The ride down the elevator from Evan's office felt like a decompression chamber. The silence was absolute, broken only by the hum of the machinery lowering me back to street level. I did not go home immediately to cry or to drink. I went into crisis management mode. The emotional part of my brain had shut down, leaving only the cold, hard logic of a risk analyst who had identified a critical breach in the firewall. I sat in my car in the parking garage and pulled up my phone. The first call was not to a friend, but to a locksmith. I found a 24-hour emergency service that boasted high-security installations. "I need a rekey," I told the dispatcher, "and I need it within the hour. I also need your technician to install deadbolts on the interior garage door and the master bedroom." "Interior deadbolts?" the dispatcher asked. "That is unusual for a residential job." "It is a security issue," I said. "I am willing to pay the rush fee." By the time I pulled into my driveway at 3 o'clock, the locksmith van was already waiting, as the technician drilled into the wood, replacing the standard locks with commercial-grade hardware. I felt the first true measure of safety I had felt in days. My parents had keys to the old locks. Brooke had the code to the old keypad. Now, those keys were just useless pieces of brass, and those codes were ghosts. While the drill whined in the background, I opened my laptop on the kitchen island. It was time to launch the paper missiles. Evan had already CC'd me on the cease and desist letter. It was a masterpiece of legal aggression. It wasn't just sent to Brooke. It was sent to her broker in charge, the Triangle Multiple Listing Service, and the legal department of the franchise she worked for. To whom it may concern. Please be advised that Brooke Carver is strictly prohibited from representing the property at 4208 Cedarwood Lane in any capacity. Any further attempts to list, market, or access this property will be considered criminal trespass and harassment. Furthermore, be advised that the listing agreement previously submitted was obtained via forgery. I read it twice. It was the professional equivalent of a headshot. By 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, Brooke wouldn't just be suspended, she would be radioactive. No agency in Raleigh would touch her. But I wasn't done. I logged on to the Wake County Register of Deeds portal. Evan had guided me through the process of setting up a fraud alert, or title lock. It was a service that flagged your property address in the system. If any document, a deed, a lien, a mortgage modification, was filed against my name or address, I would receive an immediate notification, and the county would require secondary identity verification before processing the recording. I clicked Activate. Property 4208 Cedarwood Lane is now monitored. They could Photoshop all the stamps they wanted. They could forge my signature 1,000 times, but they would never slip a piece of paper past me again. Next came the damage control. I thought about the Sterlings, the couple Brooke had dragged onto my porch. They were innocent victims in this. If I stayed silent, Brooke would spin a story about how her crazy sister backed out of a deal. I needed to control the narrative. I had seen the email list Brooke used for the coming soon blast. She had foolishly forwarded it to me in her attempt to pressure me. I opened a new email draft and blind copied every address on that list, including the Sterlings. Subject: Important notice. regarding 4208 Cedarwood Lane, unauthorized listing. Dear residents and realtors, I am writing to you as the sole legal owner of the property at 4208 Cedarwood Lane. It has come to my attention that this property was marketed for sale without my consent or authorization. Please be aware that any listing agreements or contracts presented to you regarding this home were invalid and based on fraudulent misrepresentation. I apologize for any inconvenience this confusion may have caused. I am currently working with the Wake County authorities and legal counsel to resolve the identity theft issues that led to this situation. This home is not for sale. Sincerely, Tessa Carver. I hit send. I didn't say my sister lied. I didn't say my family is toxic. I used the words identity theft and authorities. I framed it as a security crime, which it was. By the time that email hit inboxes across Raleigh, Brooke's reputation as a reliable agent would be incinerated. She wouldn't be the victim of a family spat. She would be a liability. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the living room. The locksmith finished his work, handing me a set of heavy silver keys. "Nobody's getting in here without a battering ram," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "That is top-tier hardware." "Thank you," I said. I paid him $350 in cash. It was the best money I had ever spent. My phone buzzed. It was Linda. I stared at the screen, a part of me, the part that was 5 years old and wanted my mommy, wanted to answer and hear her apologize. But the 32-year-old risk analyst knew better. I let it go to voicemail. Then I sent a text. All communication goes through Evan until the final agreement is signed. Do not come to the house. The locks have been changed, and the police have been notified to treat uninvited guests as trespassers. 5 minutes later, a reply from Mark came through. "Tessa, be reasonable. We are your parents. You are treating us like criminals." I didn't reply. I just forwarded the screenshot to Evan with a note. "Add this to the harassment file." By Monday morning, Evan had the final weapon ready. He called it the Family Settlement and Release Agreement, but in reality, it was a confession of judgment wrapped in legal polite speak. He sent it over for my review at 10 o'clock. The document was brutal. It required Mark and Brooke to admit, in writing, to the creation of the forged quitclaim deed. It required Brooke to voluntarily surrender her real estate license permanently, not just a suspension, but a surrender. It required Mark to liquidate his assets to repay the fraudulent loans he had taken out in the other LLC schemes. And most importantly, it contained a snapback clause. If they ever contacted me again, or if they ever disparaged me publicly, or if they failed to pay back a single cent of the money Brooke had stolen from those elderly clients, I reserved the right to file the original police report for felony forgery immediately. It was a leash. I was putting a collar around their necks. I told Evan to send it. At noon, my mother called Evan's office. She demanded to speak to me. Evan patched her through, but he stayed on the line, recording the call. "Tessa," Linda's voice was wet and thick, likely from a sleepless night. "We read the document. You can't make us sign this. It admits to crimes." "You committed crimes, Mom," I said, putting the phone on speaker as I organized my desk. "The document just acknowledges reality." "But if we sign this," Linda sobbed, "Mark could lose his standing in the community. Brooke will never work in this town again. You are destroying us." "I am not destroying you," I said calmly. "I am preventing you from destroying me. There is a difference." "Can't we just handle this in the house?" Linda pleaded. "We can work out a payment plan. We can write a private contract. We don't need to involve the licensing board. Please, Tessa, let's keep this in the family." I stopped what I was doing. I looked around my kitchen, my sanctuary, the place they had tried to sell out from under me to cover their own failures. "In the house?" I repeated. "Mom, in the house is when you respect my rights. In the house is when you don't forge my signature. You took this out of the house the moment you uploaded a fake deed to the county government server. You made it public record. I am just finishing the paperwork." "Mark is terrified," she whispered. "He says you have turned into ice." "I learned from the best," I said. You have two choices. Option 1, sign the agreement by 5 o'clock today. Option 2, Evan walks the evidence packet to the district attorney at 5:01. And Mom, the packet includes the emails where you and Dad discuss the loophole with Brooke. I have those too. There was a silence on the other end. A long, suffocating silence. You hacked our emails? She gasped. No, I lied effortlessly. Brooke forwarded them to me by accident when she sent the listing agreement. Sloppy. It wasn't true, but fear was a powerful motivator, and I needed them to believe I saw everything. We will sign, Linda whispered. God help us. We will sign. Good, I said. Send the PDF to Evan. Do not bring it here. I hung up. I sat there for a moment, listening to the silence of the house. It wasn't the warm, cozy silence of a home anymore. It was the silence of a fortress after a siege. I checked my credit report one last time. Frozen. I checked the security cameras. Active. I checked the county portal. Alerts on. I was safe, but as I looked at the empty chair where my mother used to sit during holidays, I realized the cost of that safety. I had effectively orphaned myself. I had used the law to amputate a gangrenous limb, but the phantom pain was already starting to set in. Mark was right about one thing. I wasn't the daughter they knew anymore. That daughter, the one who sought their approval, the one who loaned them money, the one who wanted to be good. She had died the moment I saw my signature forged on that paper. The woman who replaced her was harder, she was colder, and she was the sole, undisputed owner of 4208 Cedarwood Lane. I walked to the front door and locked the new deadbolt. The heavy thud of the metal sliding into place sounded like a gavel coming down. Case closed. The signing of the family settlement and release agreement took place at 4 o'clock on Monday afternoon. The atmosphere in Evan's conference room was not one of reconciliation. It felt more like a surrender ceremony after a long, bloody siege. My family sat on one side of the table, and I sat on the other, separated by a distinct line of mahogany that felt as wide as the Grand Canyon. Evan placed the final document in the center of the table. He did not smile. He did not offer coffee. He simply opened the folder to the page marked Exhibit A. Before you sign, Evan said, his voice level and devoid of warmth, I want to be clear about what the investigation into the notary stamp revealed. We spoke to the real Sarah Jenkins this morning. Brooke flinched as if she had been slapped. Her eyes, rimmed with red from 24 hours of crying, widened in panic. She was very confused, Evan continued, staring directly at Brooke. She confirmed she has never met Tessa Carver. She confirmed she has never been to the house on Cedarwood Lane, and most importantly, she confirmed that on the date this deed was allegedly signed, she was in Cancun for her honeymoon. Her passport stamp proves it. The silence in the room was absolute. The air conditioning vent hummed, the only sound in a room where 3 people were holding their breath. So, Evan said, leaning back, the witness testimony is not just inconsistent, it is non-existent. You didn't just forge a signature. Brooke, you fabricated a person's presence. You created a ghost. Linda let out a small, strangled sob. She looked at the paper as if it were radioactive. For the first time, I saw the dawn of true understanding in her eyes. All weekend, she had been clinging to the idea that this was just a mix-up, a shortcut that went wrong. Now, staring at the proof of a fabricated reality, she realized that a single fake signature was not a technicality. It was a weapon that could destroy her life. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Linda whispered, her voice shaking. We just wanted to keep the family afloat. By sinking me? I asked. No, Mark barked. Though his voice lacked its usual thunder, he looked small in his chair, a man whose ego had been punctured by the sharp point of the truth. We would have paid you back. Tessa, I had a plan. I always have a plan. Like the plan with the restaurant? I asked. Like the plan with the guarantee that is about to cost you your own house? Mark's face turned a mottled purple. He turned on Brooke, his fear converting instantly into rage. This is your fault, he spat at her. You told me the quitclaim was a standard procedure for family trusts. You told me it was a loophole. You never told me you were inventing witnesses." "Me?" Brooke shrieked, jumping out of her chair. "You are the one who called me crying because the bank was threatening to garnish your accounts. You told me to fix it. You said, 'I don't care how you do it. Just get me the equity.' You put the gun in my hand. Dad." "I didn't tell you to pull the trigger," Mark shouted back. "You are a coward," Brooke screamed. "You are happy to spend the money, but the second it gets hot, you throw me under the bus." I watched them. I watched the people who had raised me, the people who claimed to be the pillars of my world, tearing at each other's throats like starving dogs. It was the most painful thing I had ever seen, and yet, it was the most necessary. This was the moment I had been avoiding my whole life. I had always feared that if I set a boundary, I would lose their love. Now I realized the truth. There was no love to lose. There was only a transactional alliance that dissolved the moment the currency of compliance ran out. "Stop," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The authority in my voice was absolute. They froze, panting, looking at me. "I am not interested in who held the gun and who drove the getaway car," I said. "You are both guilty, and you—" I looked at my mother, who was weeping silently into a tissue. "You are the driver who knew the destination but pretended to be asleep in the back seat." I pushed the settlement papers toward them. "Sign it," I commanded. "Mark, you are admitting to the conspiracy. Brooke, you are surrendering your license effective immediately, and you are all agreeing to a permanent restraining order regarding my property and my finances." "Tessa," Linda pleaded, reaching a hand across the table. "Please, we can't sign this. If we sign this, we can never ask you for help again. What if we get sick? What if we end up on the street?" "Then you will have to rely on each other," I said coldly, "because I am done being your insurance policy." Brooke was the first to break. She grabbed the pen, her hand shaking so violently that the tip scratched against the paper. She signed her name. Then she signed the surrender of her license. She pushed the papers away and put her head in her hands, sobbing with the grief of a woman who had just realized her golden ticket was actually a subpoena. Mark signed next. He didn't look at me. He signed with angry, jagged strokes, as if he could carve his dignity back out of the paper. Linda was the last. She held the pen for a long time, looking at me, waiting for me to crack, waiting for the dutiful daughter to surface and say, "It is okay. Mom, I forgive you. Tear it up." I held her gaze. I didn't blink. I didn't soften. She lowered her eyes and signed. Evan took the documents. He checked every signature, every date. Then he stamped them with his own notary seal, a real one, with a valid commission number. "It is done," Evan said. "The alert on the property title is permanent. The confession is filed in my safe. If you attempt to contact Tessa, or if you attempt to disparage her, or if you fail to repay the victims of your other schemes, these documents go to the district attorney. Do you understand?" They nodded. "Then leave," I said. They stood up. It was a slow, shuffling movement. The arrogance they had walked in with on Sunday was gone. Linda had lost her power to manipulate. Mark had lost his delusion of patriarchal authority. And Brooke had lost the only thing she cared about, her image. They walked to the door. Linda paused, her hand on the handle. "We just wanted to be a family," she whispered. "No," I said. "You wanted a bank. Families don't require collateral." She opened the door and they walked out. The latch clicked shut behind them. I sat in the chair for a long time, listening to the silence. It wasn't lonely. It felt clean. It felt like the air after a thunderstorm, crisp and charged with ozone. "Are you okay?" Evan asked, packing up the files. "I am," I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. "I am the owner of my house. Finally." "You were always the owner," Evan said. "On paper," I agreed. "But today, I own the peace inside it." I went home that evening. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold. I walked up the driveway. past the spot where Brooke had planted her sign, past the porch where I had confronted the Sterlings. I keyed in the code to my new commercial-grade lock. The bolt slid back with a heavy, satisfying thud. I walked into my study. On the desk lay the certified copy of the affirmation of ownership that Evan had prepared. It was a simple document, stating clearly and irrevocably that Tessa Carver was the sole fee-simple owner of the property. I took the document and placed it in a frame. I didn't put it in a drawer. I hung it on the wall, right next to my diploma. It wasn't a trophy. It was a boundary marker. It was a reminder that the people who claimed to love me were the ones who had necessitated the strongest locks. I poured a glass of wine and sat in the living room, looking out at the oak trees in the backyard. My phone was silent. My email was empty. The drama was over. Mark would sell his house and downsize. Brooke would have to find a real job. Linda would have to learn to live without a scapegoat. They would survive. People like them always did. But they would do it without me. I took a sip of wine. The title search had started as a quest to find a forged signature, but in the end, it had revealed something far more important. It revealed that respect is not a default setting in families. It is something that must be enforced, sometimes with a cease and desist order, and sometimes with the terrifying courage to say no to the people you are supposed to say yes to. I was alone in my big house, the house they said was too big for one person, but as I stretched out on the sofa, listening to the quiet rhythm of my own life, it didn't feel too big at all. It felt exactly the right size for a woman who had finally claimed her own space. From now on, anyone who wanted to walk through my door would have to knock, and if they claimed to be family, they would have to prove it, not with blood, but with evidence. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know revenge isn't always about destroying the other person. Sometimes, the best revenge is just securing your own peace and locking the door. I would love to hear your thoughts on how I handled this. Did I go too easy on them? Or was the permanent legal threat enough? Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear about standing up for themselves. Stay safe and check your deeds.